The sun hung low over the hills, casting long shadows across the village of Darren's Hollow. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the smell of cooked grain drifted on the wind. Children ran barefoot between homes made of stone and timber, their laughter light. Yet, beneath the calm surface, fear lived in every heart. Cale, the young blacksmith's apprentice, worked in silence. His hands were covered in soot, his arms sore from hammering steel. He glanced over his shoulder, careful to make sure no elf patrols were near. It was not yet the time for curfew, but they sometimes came early, just to remind the humans who ruled. Inside his workshop, behind a loose stone in the wall, Cale hid something forbidden. It was a small book, old and wrapped in worn leather. Its pages were filled with strange symbols, words from before the elves took control. He couldn't read most of it, but some parts had pictures. One showed a man holding a burning sword, standing over a shattered tower. Another showed people with eyes bright like stars. Cale didn't know if the stories were true, but he believed in them. Deep down, he felt something stir every time he opened that book. The elders said humans had always served elves, that it was the natural way. But the book told of a different time, when humans ruled cities of stone, and the sky answered their call. That evening, while others gathered around fires for supper, Cale slipped away toward the edge of the village. He climbed a rocky hill, a place where few dared to go. From the top, he could see the great white towers of Elven lands far in the distance. Their light shimmered like starlight, cold and perfect. "Why do they fear us?" he whispered, speaking only to the wind. "Why did they burn our past?" Behind him, a twig snapped. He turned fast, hand reaching for the small hammer at his side. But it was only Marin, the weaver's son, out gathering firewood. "You're not supposed to be up here," Marin said, eyes wide. "They say the Watchers see everything." Cale smiled a little. "Let them watch. I'm not doing anything wrong." Marin stepped closer. "They burned Trenton's barn yesterday." He had a silver coin they couldn't explain. Cale's smile faded. He knew. The elves didn't allow humans to own silver, books, or weapons. Anything that might make them remember the old ways was a threat. Just then, a horn blew in the distance. Short, sharp. Cale froze. That sound meant one thing. A patrol was near. "Go," he told Marin. "Run back to your house. Now." As Marin took off down the path, Cale hid the book deeper in his coat. He didn't run. He walked back slowly, head down, heart pounding. He knew they might search the village. They might question everyone. But he also knew this. If humans were ever to rise again, someone had to remember. Someone had to believe. And he would not forget. The village of Darren's Hollow had not known peace for a long time. The elves had kept their word in some ways. There was food, and the humans were allowed to live. But it came with a cost. Each month, the elven patrols would take their share. Food, wood, and any tools they deemed valuable. No one dared to resist. Cale stood at the edge of his home, watching the horizon. A thick fog had rolled in, and the sun was just beginning to sink behind the hills. It was the perfect time for a secret meeting. He had been gathering a small group of trusted friends and villagers over the past weeks, sharing what he had learned from the old book. None of them knew exactly what was hidden in the past, but they all shared the same hunger for something more than their quiet lives under the elves' rule. Cale was meeting them in the Deadwood, a forest that lay just beyond the village. The elves had always warned humans to stay away, saying that the woods were dangerous. No one knew exactly why, but to Cale, it felt like the one place where he could find answers, where no elven patrols would follow. He made his way down the worn trail, stepping carefully over roots and fallen branches. Soon, the trees grew thick, their branches twisting into the sky like giant arms reaching for the stars. A thick green fog settled over the ground, muffling every sound. It was as if the forest had its own rules, its own world. When Cale reached the clearing, he saw the others waiting, their faces nervous but determined. There was Tessa, the baker's daughter, with her sharp eyes and quick wit. Hendrik, the carpenter, who had once crafted furniture for the elves before they took everything. And old Melvin, the village elder, whose knowledge of ancient stories had been passed down through generations. "You're late," Tessa whispered as Cale approached. "The elves are more watchful than ever." Cale nodded, glancing over his shoulder to make sure they weren't being followed. "We can't keep living like this," he said softly. "The elves won't stop until they've taken everything. But we have something they don't expect." He reached into his coat and pulled out the small book. He placed it on a flat rock in the center of the group, its worn cover glowing faintly in the dim light. "This is our chance," Kale said. "We can't just wait for them to destroy us. We need to fight back." Hendrik leaned forward, eyes wide. "How? We're not soldiers. We have no weapons." "We don't need weapons," Kale replied. "We need knowledge. This book has something in it, something they can't control. It's part of the old world, part of us." Old Melvin's voice cracked as he spoke. "There were rumors of such things, artifacts left behind by our ancestors. If this book is truly what it seems." He trailed off, the weight of his words heavy in the silence. "We need to go further," Kale said, determination in his voice. "There's a place deep in the deadwood. It's said to be the heart of the forest. If the book is right, we might find something there, something powerful." Tessa looked at him with doubt in her eyes. "And what if the elves are waiting for us? They've known about the deadwood for centuries." "Then we'll find a way to outsmart them," Kale said, his voice firm. "We have to, or we'll lose everything." The others nodded, understanding the truth in his words. The time for hiding was over. The fire of rebellion had been lit, and now there was no turning back. The deadwood was darker than Kale had expected. As the group ventured deeper, the trees grew taller, their trunks twisted in strange shapes, and their branches reached out like grasping hands. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss. The quiet was oppressive, broken only by the occasional sound of an animal skittering in the underbrush. The deeper they went, the more uneasy Kale felt. Tessa kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to jump out of the shadows. Hendrik's hammer, strapped to his back, felt heavier with each step, and even old Melvin, who was normally calm, looked tense. The weight of the forest was pressing in on them, and Kale knew it would only get worse the farther they went. "Are you sure about this?" Tessa asked, her voice barely a whisper. "This place feels wrong." "We have no choice," Kale said, his voice steady, but his heart pounding in his chest. "The book said there's something here that can help us. We have to keep going." The path became less clear, and they had to push through thick undergrowth. It was slow work, and soon their clothes were torn, their arms scratched by thorns. The further they ventured, the more the forest seemed to close in around them. Just as Kale was about to suggest they rest for a moment, a sharp sound pierced the air. A twig snapped, followed by the rustle of leaves. The group froze. "Did you hear that?" Hendrik whispered. Kale nodded, signaling for everyone to stay still. He listened closely, his heart thumping in his ears. The sound came again, faint but unmistakable. Someone was following them. The air seemed to grow colder, and the shadows around them shifted. Kale's hand went to the small dagger at his side, but he hesitated. Whoever was out there, they were skilled. Kale had grown up hearing stories of the Elven assassins, the silent, deadly hunters who could slip through the woods without a trace. And this forest, it was their home. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was a woman, tall and lean, with the sharp, angular features of the elves. Her eyes were cold, silver gray, and her movements were smooth, like water flowing over stones. She was dressed in dark, fitted armor, and in her hands she held a long, curved blade. Kale's heart raced, but he didn't draw his weapon. Something about her posture, something in the way she moved, told him she wasn't here to attack. She paused a few paces away, studying them with an unreadable expression. "You're trespassing," she said, her voice quiet but commanding. Kale's grip on his dagger tightened, but he didn't answer immediately. The others were waiting for him to speak. He could feel the tension in the air. This woman, she was not like the other elves he had seen. She had the look of someone used to silence, to being invisible in the shadows. "We're just passing through," Kale said carefully. "We mean no harm." The elf didn't seem convinced, but she didn't strike. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes locked on Kale's. "What do you seek in these woods?" she asked. Kale hesitated. He knew that speaking the truth could be dangerous, but he also knew they had little choice. "We're looking for something," he said, "something from the old world." The elf's eyes flickered at the mention of the old world, and for a moment, Cale thought he saw a hint of recognition, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You won't find what you seek," she said, her tone cold. "The Deadwood holds many secrets, but it's not meant for humans. Turn back while you can." Cale stood his ground, but his mind raced. "She's one of them, an assassin. She's here to stop us." Before he could speak, the elf took a step back, and her eyes flickered toward the path behind them. The rustling sounds grew louder. "They're coming," she said simply, "and they won't let you leave." Cale felt a chill run through him. It was clear now. The Elven patrols had found them, but the assassin, the elf before him, just turned and began to walk away without a word. "Wait," Cale called out, his voice sharper now. The elf stopped, glancing back over her shoulder. Her silver-gray eyes met his, and for a brief moment, he saw something in them, something human. "If you want to survive," she said softly, "follow me." Without waiting for a response, she vanished back into the shadows. Cale exchanged a look with the others, and though they were all unsure, they followed her. They had no choice. The forest was closing in. The forest grew darker as they followed the mysterious elf through the Deadwood. The air was thick with dampness, and the sounds of the trees shifting in the wind were the only things that broke the silence. Cale could feel his heart racing. Every step felt like they were getting deeper into enemy territory. They had no idea what awaited them, but they couldn't turn back now. The elf led them through thick underbrush, her movements quick and silent, like a shadow. Cale and the others struggled to keep up, the rough terrain slowing them down. Tessa tripped on a root and fell, but she quickly picked herself up, brushing dirt from her hands. Hendrik's large frame was less suited for the forest's narrow paths, and he had to duck under branches every few moments. "Stay close," the elf said over her shoulder, her voice barely a whisper. "They'll be watching us." Cale nodded, his eyes scanning the dark forest around them. It was unsettling. He could feel the presence of something nearby, even though he couldn't see it. The elf's warning hung in the air, and every rustling leaf seemed like a threat. Who is she, really? Cale wondered. Why is she helping us? After what felt like hours, they came to a small clearing. The trees parted slightly to reveal a camp hidden deep in the forest. It was a strange sight. A group of humans, all wearing rough clothing, sitting around a fire. They looked up as the elf appeared, their faces a mix of surprise and wariness. They didn't seem to expect anyone, especially not humans, to be coming from the Deadwood. The elf nodded toward Cale. "They're here to help," she said. Her tone was blunt, and she didn't explain further. The humans around the fire looked at one another before one of them, a tall man with a scar over his eye, stood up. "We don't take kindly to strangers," he said, his voice gruff. "You should leave before things get ugly." Cale stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "We didn't come here to fight. We came because we need your help. The elves, they're too strong. We can't defeat them alone." The man with the scar studied him for a long moment, then glanced at the elf. After a tense silence, he sighed and motioned for them to sit. "Fine, you can stay for now, but you'd better explain yourself." Cale nodded and looked at the others. They sat around the fire, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. It wasn't often that humans came together like this. The elves had worked hard to keep them divided, to make sure they stayed weak and scattered. Cale had heard stories of other villages that had tried to resist, but none had lasted long. "We found something," Cale began, his voice low but firm. "An ancient artifact. It's from before the elves took control. We believe it holds power that can help us fight back." The scared man raised an eyebrow. "An artifact? How do we know you're not just trying to trick us?" Cale took the small book from his bag and held it out for the group to see. "This is it. We don't know everything about it, but it's old, it's human, and it's the key to turning the tide." The group leaned forward, studying the book. Even the elf, who had been silent up until this point, glanced at it with interest. The scared man slowly reached out and took the book. He flipped through the pages, his fingers brushing over the strange symbols. "This is real," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "This is ancient magic, the kind we haven't seen in years." "What does it mean?" Cale asked, his voice filled with urgency. "How can we use it?" The man closed the book and looked up at Kale, his eyes filled with new resolve. "This," he said, "is the beginning of something big. It's the spark that could light a fire. But we'll need more than just this book. We'll need weapons, we'll need allies, and we'll need to move quickly." Kale felt a rush of hope. This is it. This is our chance. The elf spoke again, her voice steady. "The time for hiding is over. We fight now, together." With that, the fire crackled louder, and the sound of distant drums echoed in the night. The Ember Rebellion had begun. The fire crackled brightly in the center of the camp, casting long shadows on the faces of those gathered around it. Kale sat with the others, his mind racing. The scared man had taken the book and passed it around to those in the camp, and the quiet murmur of voices discussing the ancient text filled the air. Kale could feel the weight of their attention on him, waiting for the next step. The scared man, whose name Kale had learned was Garen, stood and turned to face the group. "We need to move fast," Garen said, his voice sharp and commanding. "The elves won't sit idle. They'll come looking for us. They always do." Kale nodded, but a knot of worry tightened in his stomach. The elves were swift. Their patrols were relentless, and they had resources beyond anything humans could imagine. Even if they had an artifact, even if they had knowledge of the old world, could they really stand a chance? Tessa, who had been quietly listening, stood up and spoke. "How do we fight them? We don't have an army. We don't have weapons like theirs." Garen looked at her, his eyes steady. "We have something better," he said, his voice low but full of certainty. "We have surprise, and we have this." He gestured to the book, now back in Cal's hands. "This is the key to their power. The elves don't know we found it. They don't know we're learning their secrets." Kale felt the weight of the book in his hands. It was heavy with the past, with promises of power, but he also felt something else. Fear. What if they were wrong? What if this ancient magic was not what they hoped? "So, what's our plan?" Kale asked, breaking the silence. "How do we use this? Where do we start?" Garen looked at him for a long moment before answering. "First, we need to get to a place where we can learn more about the magic in this book. There's an old temple, deep in the Deadwood, hidden from the elves. It's been abandoned for centuries, but it's said to hold the answers we need. If we can get there, we might be able to unlock the magic within." "And the elves?" Kale asked, his voice quiet but full of concern. "They'll come after us," Garen said, his tone grim. "But we'll have the advantage. They won't expect a group of humans to strike back, and they won't expect us to have the knowledge we found." Kale felt a spark of hope. For the first time in his life, it seemed like they might actually stand a chance. He glanced around at the others, Tessa, Hendrik, Melvin, and even the silent elf who had yet to speak. They were all in this together. "For better or worse, we leave at first light," Garen said. "Rest while you can. We need to be ready." The fire flickered as the group settled into an uneasy silence. Kale lay back on the ground, staring up at the sky. He tried to calm his racing thoughts, but the weight of the coming days pressed heavily on him. The elves would come, he was sure of it. They would not let a small band of humans get away with this. But for the first time in his life, Kale felt something else, something stronger than fear. It was the beginning of hope. The Ember Rebellion had started, and no matter what happened, he was ready to fight for a future where humans could stand on their own. As the night deepened, the sounds of the forest became louder. The chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for the first move in a battle that would change everything. The first light of dawn filtered through the trees, casting a soft glow on the group as they gathered their things. The air was cool and damp, and the forest was alive with the sounds of birds and the rustling of leaves. Kale felt a knot of tension in his stomach, but he forced himself to stay focused. Today would be a turning point. Either they would find the answers they needed, or they would be lost in the Deadwood forever. Garen had led them to a narrow path that wound through the trees, over rocky ground, and beneath thick, low-hanging branches. It was a difficult journey, but Kale kept his eyes forward, determined not to lose hope. Tessa walked beside him, her steps quick but quiet. Hendrik, his large frame moving with surprising agility, kept a watchful eye on the surroundings, his hand never far from his hammer. After hours of walking, the path began to change. The trees grew denser, their trunks wider, and the air felt heavier. It was as though they were stepping into a place forgotten by time. Kel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, but every time he glanced around, there was nothing. Only the endless trees and thick fog that seemed to close in around them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the trees parted, revealing a stone structure. It was ancient. Tall columns stood at the entrance, some cracked and broken, others covered in moss. Vines crawled up the stone walls, nearly hiding the carvings that decorated them. It was clear that this place had been untouched for centuries. The temple had been forgotten, just like the old magic. "This is it," Garen said, his voice low but filled with awe. "The Temple of Whispers." Cale felt his heart race. This was the place they had been searching for, the place that could hold the secrets they needed to fight back. But as they approached the entrance, a strange feeling washed over him. It wasn't fear exactly, but something else. A sense of ancient power, as if the very stones of the temple were alive, watching them. "Stay close," Garen warned, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "We don't know what's inside. Be ready for anything." The group moved forward, stepping carefully over the moss-covered ground. The entrance was wide, but the air inside was cold and thick with dust. Kel could barely see, but he noticed faint symbols etched into the stone floor, glowing softly in the dim light. Tessa was the first to speak. "What are those markings?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Garen crouched down, studying the symbols. "They're ancient," he said, his voice filled with reverence. "They tell the story of the first humans, the ones who resisted the elves before the dark times." "So this place really is from before the elves came?" Cale asked, his mind racing. "This is where they hid their secrets." "Yes," Garen replied, standing up. "This is where the old magic was kept. We can find the answers here, if we're willing to look." Cale stepped forward, his eyes scanning the walls. The carvings were intricate, depicting scenes of battles, of humans standing strong against overwhelming odds. Some of the images showed strange creatures, beasts that Cale couldn't recognize, and others showed human warriors wielding powerful glowing weapons. "It's incredible," Cale murmured, "but how do we unlock it? How do we use the magic?" Garen stepped toward the center of the room. "We need to find the heart of the temple. It's said to hold the power. If we can reach it, we'll be able to access what was hidden here long ago." The air grew colder as they moved deeper into the temple, the shadows growing longer. Each step felt heavier, as if the temple was testing them. But Cale kept moving forward. He knew they were close. The answers were within reach. As they entered a large chamber, a sudden feeling of unease washed over Cale. Something was wrong. The temple seemed to shift around them, and the faint glow of the symbols grew brighter, casting eerie shadows on the walls. They were not alone. The moment they stepped into the large chamber, the temperature dropped, and the air grew thick. Cale felt a chill spread through his bones as he looked around. The walls of the chamber were covered in the same glowing symbols they had seen earlier, but now they seemed to shift and pulse, as though alive. The faint glow flickered like a heartbeat, casting eerie shadows across the room. "Something's not right," Tessa muttered, her voice tense. She looked around nervously, her hand on the hilt of her sword. "Stay alert," Garen said in a low voice, his eyes scanning the shadows. "This is the heart of the temple. If we're going to find what we need, we have to get to the center." Cale nodded, trying to shake the unease that was growing in his chest. The room was silent except for the soft sound of their footsteps on the stone floor, yet with every step they took, the sense that something was watching them grew stronger. They moved cautiously forward, the faint light from the symbols guiding their way. As they neared the center of the chamber, a loud, hollow noise echoed through the room. It sounded like a door opening, though there was nothing visible that could have made the sound. Cale stopped in his tracks, his hand instinctively reaching for his dagger. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "We're not alone," Garen said grimly, his eyes narrowing. "It's a trap." Before Cale could respond, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The chamber seemed to shake, and a low rumble filled the air. Suddenly, the walls of the room shifted, revealing large, shadowy figures that had been hidden in the darkness. They were tall, their bodies covered in flowing dark robes that seemed to merge with the shadows. Their faces were hidden in the folds of their hoods, but their eyes gleamed like white fire, cold and unblinking. Cal's heart raced as the figures began to move toward them, their steps silent and swift. He could feel the power in the air, like a storm about to break. Garen stepped forward, his posture ready, but he didn't draw his weapon yet. "Who are they?" Cal asked, his voice tight. "Guardians," Garen replied, his tone steady. "Created by the temple long ago to protect its secrets. They'll test us before we can go any further." The Guardians circled around them, their movements like shadows blending with the darkness. Tessa gripped her sword tighter, but Cal could see the doubt in her eyes. Even Hendrik, usually so confident, looked unsure. "What kind of test?" Tessa asked, her voice sharp. The leader of the Guardians stepped forward, his voice a whisper that echoed in the still air. "To pass, you must face the shadows within yourselves. Only then can you claim the power of the temple." "Shadows within ourselves," Cal repeated, confusion clouding his thoughts, the figure's white eyes fixed on him. "The trial is simple. Confront your greatest fear, your deepest regret. Only then will you be worthy." Cal's breath caught in his throat. A trial of fear, he thought. This isn't just about power. It's about something more, something deeper. "We can't back down now," Garen said, his voice steady as he took a step forward. "We must face it." With that, the Guardians raised their hands, and the shadows around them seemed to stretch and grow. The light from the symbols dimmed, and the room was filled with a deep, suffocating darkness. Cal's heart pounded in his chest. This is it. We have to face whatever is coming. The ground shook again, and a voice echoed in the darkness. "Are you ready?" Cal didn't answer, but his mind raced, his body tensing for what was to come. The shadows were closing in, and the trial had begun. The darkness in the chamber thickened, pressing against Cal and his companions from all sides. The faint glow of the symbols was barely visible now, as if the shadows were swallowing the light. Cal's heart raced, the air growing heavier with each passing moment. He could feel the weight of the trial bearing down on him. "What is this?" Hendrik muttered, his voice uneasy. "This isn't like anything we've faced before." "Stay focused," Garen said, his tone low and steady. "Whatever this trial is, we have to face it, together." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the remaining light. The shadows seemed to stretch out, swirling around them, until Cal could no longer see his own hands in front of his face. A whisper echoed in the darkness, soft and distant. "Face your fear." Cal's breath caught in his throat. He didn't know what to expect, but the words filled him with a deep sense of unease. The air grew colder, and in the blackness, strange shapes began to appear. Flickering shadows that seemed to take form before his eyes. They were fleeting, shifting, but Cal could feel their presence, like something dark, something that had always been there. The whisper came again, this time louder. "Face your fear." Cal gripped his dagger tightly, but it felt like a useless thing in the face of the darkness. His mind raced, and he could feel the weight of every choice he had ever made. The mistakes, the regrets, the fears he had buried deep within himself. "Am I strong enough for this?" he wondered. "What if I fail?" Then, in the depths of the shadows, Cal saw something. A figure, a memory long buried. It was a scene from his past, one he had tried to forget. He was back in his village, watching as the elves descended on them, their soldiers sweeping through the streets, leaving destruction in their wake. He saw himself, helpless, as his family was torn apart, as everything he had known was taken from him. The fear he had felt then came flooding back, sharp and suffocating. "No," Cal whispered, his voice barely audible. "I won't let this hold me back." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. He was no longer the boy who had watched his village fall. He was stronger now. The elves had taken everything, but they hadn't taken his will. He had survived, and he had fought for more than just survival. He had fought for the chance to take back his future. The shadowy figure began to fade, its presence diminishing as Cal faced it head-on, refusing to let it control him. The darkness that had threatened to consume him seemed to recede, as if his courage had pushed it back. The air lightened, and the pressure in his chest eased. "You have faced your fear," a voice said, echoing through the chamber. "You are ready." Cale opened his eyes, and the darkness had lifted. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, their power now visible and undeniable. The Guardians, who had been silent observers, nodded in approval. One by one, Tessa, Hendrik, and Garen faced their own trials. Each one confronted their deepest fears, memories they had long buried, regrets they had never faced, and one by one, they too overcame them, their courage lighting the way. When the last of the shadows vanished, the room was filled with a new light, warm and steady. Cale could feel the power of the temple flowing around them, filling the air. They had passed the trial, and now, the heart of the temple was theirs to claim. "We're ready," Cale said, his voice steady and firm. "Let's finish this." With the trial behind them, they stepped forward, prepared to unlock the secrets that would give them the power to stand against the elves. The future of their people depended on it.